So I think I know why California schools are disastrous, because of the propositions that that did not allow us to invest in the schools, and now the private schools have created a way to have rich people bring their kids to one school and then make sure they don't pay for the other. But I want to follow up on what you said, because look, on the Statue of Liberty it says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your masses, etc." And so when the Irish were first coming in, they were dirt poor. They were escaping a famine. The Italians dirt poor. The Jews dirt poor. Under your logic, would we not have kept them out?
Well, no, because this is a situational. Before you applaud too vigorously, I can win you. Listen, it's a situational decision. So when we had the largest wave up until recently of immigration into this country at the beginning of the last century, that was the industrialization period in this country. So who manned the factories? Who made the shoes? Who wove the textiles? Immigrants did. There was a massive need for labor, and we responded by importing huge amounts of labor. We did until 1924, in which case Americans, including recent naturalized immigrants, looked around and was like, you know what? We've had a lot of change. Change creates volatility in your society. We had a lot of drama, the progressive movement, the Wobblies. We had a lot going on in this country. We were like, you know what? We're shutting it down. And we shut it down from 1924 to 1965, not because we're racist, but because we made the decision. Now what we're looking at, and this is what drives me maybe craziest, is a landscape totally transformed by technology, by automation. This is not secret knowledge. Look it up. One of the reasons that people are so powerless, they felt they had to vote for Donald Trump, is because the value of labor is in steep decline. Immigration's part of it. Technology, I would argue, is probably even a bigger part of it. Huge sectors of the entire economy are about to be replaced by machines. This will mean massive internal displacement of workers who have even less power than they do now. Into that, you're throwing a huge number of new people. And my only question is, okay, what are they going to do in a world where a lot of the jobs now occupied by people will be occupied by machines? And the answer I get is, shut up, racist. Okay, fine. That's not actually an answer. And we have an obligation, I think, if those in my business, try to convince people or whatever, to raise the question. And I can't get anybody on either side to take it seriously at all. And that's when I begin to conclude that they're totally reckless. They don't know what they're doing, almost any of them. They're lying about it. And they're wrecking the country, because that is a very obvious chain of events that's going to take place. And nobody says it.
So Tucker there outlined, I think he made some great points, but in response to Cenk's question, which was, you know what, the Irish came, the Italians came, the Jews came, the Chinese were here, all these other immigrant populations came legally back, and what Tucker said, that was during the part of the Industrial Revolution. We needed to import labor. We absolutely had to. And they were the ones that were doing those jobs, along with Americans at that time. But we didn't have enough in the American workforce that were already here prior to that immigration wave. So, of course, we needed it at that time. Now, they're just coming. And as Tucker said, automation, machines, being replaced, people being replaced. And then on top of that, you're bringing unskilled workforce on top of the unskilled workforce that already exists here. So that's going to create massive displacement, massive problems, and bring down labor, bring down wages considerably. Okay, it has nothing to do with being racist or a bigot or anything like that. It's just in terms of looking at the sheer numbers, looking at value of labor. And value of labor will decrease if there's more labor around to decrease those wages. Let's see what Cenk's response is in response.
So one more follow-up to Lisa Tucker. So look, in terms of do we need the immigrants now, and what cycle are we in history in America? Well, a couple of southern states did some raids, took away some undocumented immigrants, and then they panicked because nobody came and took the jobs, whether it was farming or warehouses and factories, etc. And so then they had to change the law and say, okay, never mind, they can come back in. So that happened a couple of years ago, and we've seen that. So obviously, and there's actually a great number of examples of that in the country, obviously there is some need for those workers. So when I see those Latin American workers that have come in, I see the same faces as the Irish and the Italians and the Jews and all the others that came in very poor, but that made this country much, much richer in the end. And so Tucker, when you say the word demographics, I think that is what makes people go, what does that mean? And so I genuinely want to ask you about that. So you did a story about Hazleton, Pennsylvania, and you were worried that the demographics of that town was changing. Why? Why are you worried about it?
Because change...
Okay. It seems in this regard here that all Cenk is using is his chance to ask questions to get the answers and try to put Tucker into a position that maybe he says something that's going to be a gotcha or whatever. That's what's happening. And Cenk just throws out a few things. Now, one of the things he talked about was, again, these immigrant, people that came early on in the 19th, century or whatever. So my question to Cenk would be, is that, because the thing is that Cenk is trying to catch, Tucker by he keeps using the word demographic. And Cenk wants to make sure that he's implying by this that demographic is a code word for racist, being bigoted or whatever. And that's what he's throwing back at Tucker. And I would just basically want to tell Cenk, and I know how the name is pronounced, it's Cenk, but I call him Cenk. Anyways, from the Young Jerks, right? Not the Young Turks. Anyways, my question is that those immigrants that came in previously, they came here legally. They were here legally. And at a time when we needed workers, as we've talked about before. So we're comparing apples to oranges now, because these illegals, now these immigrants, are coming illegally into this country. So there's a big difference between that. Anyways, let's continue.
Because change is really hard. And I'll address the first part, I think, more interesting part of what you just said in just a second. But to the demographic question, let me just say out front, I don't ever speak in dog whistles because I can say whatever I want, and I always do. So I appreciate the question, because I'm often attacked on the basis of, maybe something, and it's probably my fault for not explaining whatever it was fully. But let me just say, nothing is in code, okay? It's all right out there. And my core concern is change and the pace of change, because I don't think that people are hardwired for it. And so you have a group, Homo sapiens, that have lived a certain way for only like 10,000 years, not a big deal. Hand-to-mouth agrarian society, boom, the machine age happens with the invention of the steam engine, something totally different, causes massive displacement, revolutions around the world. Half the world is enslaved by communism for 70 years in reaction to it. And you kind of catch your breath, and then you have this thing of the digital revolution, which totally changes everything again. And so one of my maybe my overriding concern after the wage question is how much change can people handle, actually, before they go crazy? And there's a lot of study on this. Robert Putnam at Harvard, who's hardly a right-winger, the bowling alone guy, has done a lot of really interesting study on this. Again, he's a liberal, but an honest one. And he's like, people, when they feel threatened, when things have changed too much, they get really angry and tribal, and they don't trust other people, and civic institutions collapse. And we're seeing this across the country. So there's a huge cost to changing everything up for the benefit of the few. And let me tie that to the first part of your question, which was, you said, in the South, there were raids on chicken plants, Tyson chicken plants. And the INS or ICE or whatever we're calling it now comes in and says, these people are here illegally without documentation. We're enforcing the law for once. And they couldn't find labor. Well, who is they? Well, they is the chicken plants. They is the...
That's what I want to stop at. That's what Cenk didn't talk about, right? Oh, they couldn't replace the jobs. They couldn't do it. What do you mean they couldn't do it? The reason they couldn't replace the jobs, or they could replace the job, but they didn't want to, because when they had the illegals here, they were paying them much lower labor rates, of course. And they were obviously, these people were being used and abused in the labor market. If you would have been paying them, you don't think any Americans would have come in here at $15, $20 an hour to do that work? But no, they wanted to pay them $3, $4 an hour. Maximize their profits. Blame the corporations. Blame the companies. We're not blaming the illegal aliens that were here. They're coming, but because they were here, it prevented those jobs, those wages from being raised, so Americans would take over. What, Americans don't work in cattle farms? They don't work in chicken farms? They don't work in slaughterhouses? Come on. Anyways, let's continue.
Employer, okay? And they couldn't find labor because they didn't want to pay market rates to Americans. So basically what they're saying is, even though we're in the United States, we're a company in the United States. And by the way, you can say this of Amazon and Walmart for sure, and McDonald's and lots of other big corporations that the right has defended for many years, unfortunately, and now the left defends, bizarrely. They benefit from all the institutions that make business possible, the rule of law, patents, like all the things that we have that other people don't have, okay? And yet they feel like paying the wages of Tegucigalpa. Because why wouldn't they? They're an employer. What bothers me is that no one ever calls them out on it. So like you often hear people say, well, who's going to pick the lettuce or whatever? And I'm not slagging lettuce pickers. I respect anybody who works with his hands in the sun, of course. But it's not about the picker. It's about his employer. So lettuce might cost, $4 a head. Okay. Well, an iPhone costs $1,000 because actually things have costs because they have value, because labor has value.
Absolutely.
So I guess my question is, when did liberals all become libertarian economists who are lecturing me about the market and how one thing we can't do is get in the way of employers finding the cheapest possible labor? What? When did you start defending this? And the answer, of course, is that big companies figured out the game. And they're like, for a very small price, we can buy the allegiance of the Democratic Party. All we have to do is fund their nonprofits, which they do, but more importantly, make a series of totally hollow symbolic gestures, like here's some new bathrooms, I'm for Black Lives Matter, leave me alone. And they have totally convinced your average college student that they're the cutting edge of the progressive movement. And so you see this really weird thing that always blows my mind. You go into an Apple store, and shamefully, I own Apple products, and you'll walk in and there'll be like some highly educated, kid with 2 degrees from impressive schools with a nose ring, standing in this kind of sad, spare retail space wearing a matching uniform, thinking he's part of the revolution. And I'm like, dude, you're working for the richest man in the world. Like, you're just a cog in a machine. You're a tool, actually. And he's like, no, I'm not. I'm picking up. Yeah, whatever. But I always think, the level of delusion that they've pulled off convincing the left, don't criticize suicides at Foxconn factories because, hey, we got you on the dumb social issues that don't mean anything. And they fall for it. It's hilarious.
Yeah. All right.
So just going to wrap this up here right now is that I don't think, again, if you're talking about in terms of anybody winning because of a gotcha or this or that, I don't think so. Obviously, Tucker has dominated that in terms of minutes spoken, but that's because Cenk was using his time to try to put Tucker into a position where he may say something like, again, Cenk could say, a gotcha moment. Oh, there it is. I knew you were a racist. I knew you were a bigot. And Tucker wasn't going there. He just calmly, methodically, basically said, look, it's the big corporations. They're the ones, that are doing this thing. They're the ones that are fooling everybody. They're the ones that are fooling these rich, white, liberal, elitist, kids, thinking that they're companies that they work for or companies that they represent or these huge mega corporations just because they're on you with some of the social justice issues, and they're just doing it to get your vote, get your sympathy, say, yeah, we can do it. And all of a sudden you're thinking, I'm doing a great job. This corporation's doing a great job. Because like you said, they made some extra bathrooms, or because they said, you know what, women can work in positions just as much as men can do, or we're going to pay women the same amount of money, we're going to pay women more. They make some type of virtue signaling, and everything is fine. And then guess what? Everything else that's going up on the bottom, because slave labor wages and those kind of things, and hiring illegals, and don't worry about the American citizens in this regard. Oh, who cares about that? Because we're with you on the social justice issues. And that's exactly what Tucker is arguing. So in that regard, I think Tucker, what I would say in terms of just getting his points across and, basically answering the question that Cenk asked him, hey, I think this round would probably go to Tucker Carlson. Anyways, we appreciate you taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasser Sheikh Show. I've been your guest host. My name is Dr. Nasser. Like, share, and follow us. Hit that subscription bell, notification bell as well. I'll leave you with my final thought, which is, when you're right, you're right. And when you're left, you're wrong. We'll see you again next time, folks. Take care and stay safe.